I am happy to have Automotive Seminars as a sponsor for the show. Now, if you're not familiar, Automotive Seminars is a diagnostic technician training company. They've got a website that there'll be a link to in the show notes. And what they offer is top-notch training to technicians like us in the field. I've been taking their training courses for years and have got a ton of benefit out of it. They've got top-notch instructors, John Thornton, Scott Shotton, Scott Manna, and every other month they've got a 2-night course that you can sign up for. Join in, ask questions, and afterwards, you've paid for the course, you can access a recorded version whenever you want. You can rewatch the class 2 years later in case you wanted some details on it, and that is a fantastic feature. So make sure to check out the website to see what courses they have available and what's coming up in the future. This podcast is brought to you by Jarhead Diagnostics. Jarhead Diagnostics manufactures in-house diagnostic equipment and storage solutions, as well as distributes for companies like Pico, ATS, and TopDon. One of my favorite tools that I've bought from Brandon and Jarhead Diag is the case for the U-Scope. If you don't have a U-Scope, you probably should, but if you have one, you got to get one of these 3D printed cases, has a magnet on it, has a full-size BNC lead that you can connect to, and it gets rid of the weak point of that scope, which is the mini BNC connection, which is pretty fragile. This case makes this thing nice and secure and makes it an even better tool than it was. So check out jarheaddiag.com. The link is in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by L1 Automotive Training and Keith Perkins. If you're looking for education on module programming, J2534, EEPROM work, key and immobilizer, electrical diagnostics, or drivability diagnostics, Keith has a website, l1training.com, that's got over 60 hours of training videos on all those subjects and more. When I first started out doing mobile, I utilized Keith's videos on module programming in J2534 in order to get my head wrapped around what I would need for the tooling, the computers, the software setups, what kind of obstacles I would be up against when I'm out there programming modules on cars. And it was a huge benefit to me. And I continue to use the training videos that he has on his website. So I strongly recommend checking out l1training.com. We have got Auto Rescue Tools and Isaac Rodell as a sponsor for this podcast. Hey guys, if you're looking for programming laptops, you want the laptop set up ready to go for programming control modules on vehicles, you need key cutting equipment, you need diagnostic tools, Isaac is your guy. Has all that stuff available for purchase, and the support that he offers along with the purchase has been outstanding. I bought some stuff from him in the past. I got my Dolphin key cutting tool from him several years back. And again, the support has been phenomenal. Helped me out along the way with anything additional I needed to make it work for me. Also, for the month of June 2023, they've got Autel updates for sale. So make sure to check that out as well. Again, that's autorescuetools.com. The link will be in the show notes. Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I will be your host. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. Today on the show, I've got a special guest joining me, Scott Shotton. He's been on the show before. He's a mobile technician, automotive educator at both the college and industry level. And Scott's joining me on the show today to talk about exactly that, education in the automotive field. What does
today's technician entering the field need to know to be successful? What can we do as educators, instructors to prepare them to be as successful as possible in today's automotive world? What do we need to consider as a teacher or instructor going into these classes, whether it be the college or the industry level? And how can we be the best learning facilitators that we possibly can be? Because that's the goal here. So we cover this and a lot more. Really enjoyed this talk with Scott. So let's jump right into the interview.
Well, how's it going, Scott? How's life?
Life is good. Well, it's good, except hiding in my office right now talking to you because my wife is positive for COVID. For the past couple of days, I've been kind of chilling out and, staying away from my wife, which is kind of weird. But.
Yeah, well, my wife had it in November, and it was very strange because, you're in the same house, so there's only so much you can do, but right. It's really weird trying to keep your distance with somebody you spend all your time with.
Right. Well, luckily my kids are a little bit older because I'm old, and they're all out of the house right now, so we have spare bedrooms, and so we can sequester. Would that be a good word?
Sure.
We can stay apart. It's relatively easy, and I can say that we now have the cleanest doorknobs on earth because you walk around with those sanitary wipes and wipe the doorknob, anything you touch. So our doorknobs are very clean.
That's awesome. Yeah. Talking about being sequestered, we are, I think, one of maybe 3 programs or, groups of students that are actually on campus at the college that I teach at. I think it's nursing, and there's one other, auto body is the other one. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's this huge campus, and they teach academic courses. It's actually across the street, but it's the same campus. And there's nobody there but us and some janitors and some security officers, and we're walking around, and it's so strange compared to what it used to be at the college. Yep. And we actually got because they need to space us out for classroom stuff, right? We can't be in our small classrooms. They gave us this big science classroom that I get to teach in. It has 2 projectors, and you could fit like 75 people in this room, but I've got my 14 students. They're all spread out. It's so weird. I get windows in that classroom. That's pretty nice, but eventually I'll have to go back to my little dungeon of a classroom that I normally teach in.
The college that I worked at, they downsized the cap for classes so they could spread the students out. So we're a relatively small college. They had a cap at, I think it was 12 students per class, which is actually awesome. I really like that, having a small group of students. I think they're down to 8 is the cap for each class, so they could spread people out. So your college obviously chose to move you to a larger classroom so you could have more spacing. So that's 2 ways to do it. One is downsize the number of students in the same classroom, or upsize the classroom and keep the same number of students. Either way, it works for social distancing.
Yeah, it's just one of the things we talked about it with our dean and the administration, because we did spring all online. Like when COVID first hit in 2020, nobody was allowed to go on campus unless you needed teaching equipment. So it was all online, and we did the best we could, but it's terrible for a trade. I think for a lot of education, it's probably not the best, but for a trade, it's just, you're not getting so much of what you need to do if you're going to try to learn this stuff. Yeah. So we made the pitch over the summer, like, we have to be back in person. Of course, they want to limit it as much as possible, but like, we got to be there. We got to make this happen somehow. And luckily they did let us, and we've been able to do the in-person thing. And I'm thankful for that because, they're paying for the education either way. And I want to deliver the best that I can for them. I want them to actually get something out of it, that eventually COVID will be over or be a memory, and they're still going to need to
perform in their careers for decades to come. So I want to be able to set them up for that. That was
Right.
something that was really important to me. And of course we can do it safely, but man, I still think it's so important to be face to face with them.
I totally agree. I mean, a simple question is, how do you teach a trade without touching stuff, right? Whether it's welding, whether it's, I mean, can you or I, and I'm not a great welder, right? But can we teach someone how to weld with what we're doing right now? No,
Right.
no, you can't. They have to actually get their hands on it. Can you teach someone how to cut a rotor?
Right.
Machine a rotor. I'm sorry, better way to say it. Can you do that? Without them actually doing it. You can explain it, but
yeah,
it's not the same. So the trades, I don't care what the trade is, plumbing, electricians. It doesn't matter. You can't do a good job. In my opinion, you can't do a good job teaching those skills without some hands-on. And COVID has messed that up. So,
yeah, for sure. We were lucky, I guess, in this aspect, is at least in our trade, we have a lot of electrical, especially the courses that I'm teaching. I have a lot of electrical stuff I can pull on, and we can work with that in an online structure. And that's really what my focus was this spring. But man, I feel so bad for, like you said, auto body or welding, because I feel such limited amount that you could get across in an online format. And the rest of it, it's like muscle memory, right? You have to be doing it repetitively to gain those skills. So I really feel for coworkers that taught those programs in our school. But yeah, hopefully we'll get back to normal at some point here.
Yeah, at some point we will. And then we'll have something new show up.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Yeah, there's always a curveball for sure.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I wanted to bring you on here today to talk about exactly what we're getting into here is education in the automotive realm. And I was thinking a good way to start this off was I'm curious to know how you got into teaching. Because I know you taught at the college level and you teach at the professional industry level. What got you into that? And I mean, I guess, how long did you do each? I know there was some overlap where you did both.
Okay. I don't want to be too long-winded, but I'm going to make a statement really quick first. Those who can't do teach is BS, right? And in some cases, it's true, right?
Yeah.
But I think you agree, and many of our listeners will agree, that when you have to teach something, then you realize where your faults are, right? Oh, crap, I was doing this wrong. I have to explain this to somebody, and right? So we put that aside, all right? So that's one thing that I wanted to put away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Done, gone, done. My, where do we start? I don't want to be too long.
Hey, there's no rules. It's my podcast. We can go as long as we want.
Right. Okay, cool. Okay. So my history, and I don't normally, this is one of the things I'm uncomfortable with at the moment, because when I start my classes, I keep my introductions super short. I don't play, I have X number of ASC certifications, and I did this and I did that and whatever. But the way you phrase that question is, how did I get into this?
Yeah. What led you to be a teacher?
Yeah. Well, that kind of warrants, how did this happen? Right. So I actually fell into this industry. I was doing advertising design, because when I was in high school, I was a long hair hippie playing guitar and doing artwork. Right?
Okay.
That was high school. Right. And I'm sure many of us can probably associate with that.
Sure.
And then I became a bum and, slept in a car a couple nights in Chicago in January, not very comfortable. But I ended up joining the Army, and I decided probably one of the smartest choices of my life was I decided to pick another career that would help me my intent was to go back for advertising design, but I chose mechanics.
Okay.
Okay. So I went to the military and became a mechanic in the military, and I did very well at it, and I enjoyed it. And I actually got a couple ASE certifications while I was still in the military. And then when I got out, instead of going back to advertising design, I went back to school. I got my degree while I was working at a Ford dealer. I got my degree for automotive service technology from a community college in Glen Ellen, Illinois, College of DuPage.
Okay.
Right? So at the same time, I met, again, networking is a big part of this. I met one of my instructors, which is going to come back here in a minute, right? That ended up hiring me because he was a shop owner, ended up hiring me, and he took me from the Ford dealer to that independent shop, and I worked there for 15 years as a wrench, 14,
Okay.
15, something like that. So I was a full-fledged 50 hours a week plus sometimes, right? Technician, turning wrenches, doing transes, doing whatever. And while I was doing that, the head guy at the college that I graduated from approached me about teaching part-time. So I was working 50 hours a week at the shop and teaching 2 nights a week engine performance type classes, electrical or, engine performance 1, whatever the case, right? That's what I was teaching 2 nights a week. Then I go home and go to sleep.
Okay.
And I get back up and I go back to work and I turn a wrench for 10 hours and then I would go and teach, right? So it was a rough part of, my mid to late 20s, right?
Sure.
Right. And I did that for 7 years.
Okay.
And then at the same time, I started teaching for the Illinois EPA for their emissions testing program. And that's where the aftermarket started to come into play. So I started doing aftermarket stuff for the Illinois EPA and a couple other classes here and there. I started teaching at Vision. I started teaching at Tech Expo in Grand Rapids. And at the time it was Milwaukee. I started doing those classes. Then I moved into my part-time mobile business, got a little bit busier, and I switched to full-time college instruction, much like you do. Okay. So I think where I'm at, my path is right about where you are now, right?
Gotcha.
You teach full-time at the college and do mobile,
Yep, exactly.
Otherwise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So I did that for about 11 years, I think. Something like that, right? So I was teaching full-time during the day and doing mobile on, afternoons, weekends, Fridays, whatever the case. And then just right when COVID started, technically and I'm going to do air quotes here, my retirement, and I'm not old enough to retire, but my retirement from the college was in June of 2020.
Okay.
Right. So now I'm full-time mobile, but I still train around the country,
Gotcha.
or virtual, which is happening now because of COVID.
I watched your engine mechanical class for Vision just recently. I enjoyed that. So
I didn't suck?
No, not at all. No, it was funny. You had the Nissan that had, what was it? The flex plate that was.
Oh, the last one, the very last one. Yeah.
Shifted or something. And it was funny. I had one that was almost identical in what had happened, like the same day or the day prior or something like that. It was pretty funny. I was listening to it. I'm like, oh, I know it's wrong. I just went through that.
That's all right.
Yeah, it's funny how that works out. So do you remember your first day actually like teaching in front of a class when you'd never done it before and you're standing up?
Oh my God.
In front of the group and what that felt like?
I got 2 days. I got 2 days to tell you about.
Okay.
One is the first time teaching in front of college students was probably not as stressful as teaching in front of the industry.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay. So teaching in front of college students and you'd never taught before, that was a little bit like, yeah, sweating, wiping your brow, stressful. And once you get into your zone and you know the material, then if you're prepared, you're okay. The industry, when you walk into a room of, I don't know, 20 people or 200 people, it depends on where you're at.
Yeah.
You have no clue in the industry. You have no clue, who's the entry level guy that's in your class and who's the advanced level guy or girl. Okay, to be fair, right? That's in that class. So, it's a little bit nerve wracking. And I'll be honest, the first 5 minutes of my class, even to this day, I am super nervous. I'm still nervous, right? Because but once you get into your zone and you just have to know that, I know the material, and we move forward. If someone asks a question and you don't know the answer, then you just suck it up and go, I don't know the answer. Then there's no problems, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to start BSing your way through stuff, especially
No.
I would feel at a professional level because they're going to see through you pretty quick. You can BS some college students along some of the time, but not somebody that's been doing this for 20 years.
Oh, you know what? You being a college instructor, that's one of the things that I do. I don't BS them. But if they ask a question that I don't know the answer to, because I'm not perfect, I give them the option. I'm like, okay, let's theorize.
Yep.
How should this work? How does the manufacturer say this works? Okay, cool. Go pull me up the description of operation or whatever the case, and then we talk about it. But you still don't, or I don't, say, yeah, this is how it is. No, let's do the research, because you're really doing the same thing you're doing working on a car. You go in mobile. I mean, how often do you read description of operation?
Oh, I mean, I hold that near and dear to my heart. I go right to that.
How often do you read the diagnostic charts?
Yeah, that's more if I'm scanning for info. Like I need to know this value.
Right. Exactly. So the description of operation is quite often more valuable than the actual diagnostic chart, because the chart just says something stupid like
check this wire.
Check voltage at this wire.
Yeah.
But then again, when a student follows a chart and they go to step 4 and it says check the resistance of this wire, I tell them to think about, what are you checking?
Yep.
Right? I can do A and B and go yes or no and go to the next step in the chart. But if you understand what you're actually checking, that actually helps you learn about, the system.
That is one of the most important things that I stress to students that are learning this for the first time is, if you're going to do a test, any test, it doesn't matter what it is, you should have an expected result. And if you don't have an expected result from that test, let's say everything's working normally, and this is the result I would expect if everything's working normally. If you don't have that in your mind, or you don't have an idea, you need to stop and figure that out before you proceed any further, or that test is completely worthless. But that's a flow chart, right? We're just looking or yes or no and moving on to the next one. Don't necessarily understand why we did that test or what we're actually measuring. And that's one of the big things I really try to focus on with them. Slow down, think about what you're doing. Why am I doing this test, and what do I expect?
Yep, I agree. I completely agree.
One of the biggest things for me when I started teaching was when you're in front of a group, and I try to make it as interactive as I can. But you want questions, right? And you were saying like somebody asked a question that maybe you don't know, but I just like questions. I like the interaction. I don't want to know that they're engaged. And when you have a really quiet group, it's kind of tough to you as an instructor are kind of struggling through it, because I don't want to just talk and have them listen. That's not real learning. I want them to be engaged and asking questions. So you get a real quiet group and it's like, oh man, this kind of sucks. But as a student or somebody who's been in class, I'll go to industry classes and stuff. A lot of times I'd find myself not asking a question because I didn't want to bother the instructor. I didn't want to look stupid by asking this question. But then I was a teacher. I'm like, I don't just ask whatever you're thinking. I really want to hear it. And I guess for anybody that's in a class, just spit it out there and let us know what you want to know. I want to hear it.
I would completely agree, because, whether the students realize it or not, there are strategic places in your class, and whether you realize it or not with your classes, there are certain spots in your presentations where you are fishing for questions, right? For discussion, because the discussion can make it great. And that's one of the issues I have with training in the industry. If we got a time slot of, let's say, 3 hours, right, and we get an hour and a half in, and something comes up, and you pose this, situation, and all of a sudden questions start coming up. That is the best part of class, because you got 40 people in the room. One person asked the question. The 4 other probably had the same question. Right. And then you start talking about it, and then people get involved, and then they start, discussing it, and cool. You move forward. All of a sudden, next thing you know, a half an hour is gone.
Yeah.
And then you're like trying to get, but it was a productive half an hour.
Exactly.
Right? And that's really the goal, that as an instructor in front of the room, whether it's, an industry event, or, like a Vision or an ATE Seattle, whatever the case, you get the point. Or it's the college classroom, when you pose a question and everyone sits there and goes and says nothing. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
I gave you stuff here. There's discussion points. Let's go, right? And no, it's the silent audience is the worst thing for an instructor, in my opinion.
My class I had last year versus the class I had this year. My class last year was just very to themselves, very quiet, just sort of, I don't want to stand out. And so it was tough. And somebody told me to count to 8 in my head, after you ask a question, and somebody will almost always say something. This class really pushed that. I was getting up to, 10, 11. Yeah. Like, okay, we're just playing chicken here before somebody says something. But right. Every group's different, right? Every group of people. And
right.
Sometimes you almost need to control it a little bit, or it goes way off in left field. But yeah, that's the thing. I would much rather, spend that time going off in some maybe different direction that's semi-related, and we don't get to all the classroom points, versus me covering every detail perfectly and they didn't say a thing. They're not going to learn as much from that. I don't think they're not going to take as much away from me just pontificating my knowledge up front. We got to interact, and I got to know what you want. One of the things I do with them is, at the end of maybe a discussion, or I get to a certain point in whatever we're doing, and I feel like there hasn't been a lot of questions, I'll have them write down on a piece of paper with no name, just a question about what we just talked about, right? So we just covered spark plugs. Okay. So whatever we talked about, write down a question that you have, pass it up to me. You don't have to have your name on it. I'll read the question out loud and I will answer it. So they get their question answered. They don't have to ask it out loud. And then the other thing is, like you said, there's 4 or 5 people always that have the same question, and they were too scared to ask that question because they want to look stupid. So everything just goes to show, again, anybody that's in class, whatever you're thinking, wondering, someone else probably is too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny how, I probably was the same way when I was 19 years old. Now I don't give a crap. I'm gonna censor myself a little bit, right? It's like if I got a question, I'm gonna ask it.
Yeah.
Right? And find out, because I'm there for a reason. But the younger people, especially in the college level, they're shy. And then you could be in the industry level, and when I say level, you know what I mean. I'm not talking about age. I don't want to be discriminatory here, but you've been in the business for a couple of years or 20 years. You could still be shy about asking that question. Just ask the question. Just ask it. And if the trainer bullshits his way through it, then okay, take that with a grain of salt. But if the trainer does a good job answering it and is truthful, okay, good, we're good, right? Whether it's college level, high school level, or industry level.
You mentioned something there as far as like a range of skill in a particular class, and I think you'd definitely see that in the industry training, and you can speak to that, what you've seen. But in a college setting, we definitely see a large range of skill, meaning that we'll have some students come in that have like almost little to no mechanical background. Like they don't know the basic hand tools, right? We're there to help them and get them through that. But then you have, we're kind of in a rural area, and we get some people maybe that grew up on a farm, and I mean, they've got the nuts and bolts of it down. They're there to learn the technical stuff, and we've got to try to get everything together so that everybody gets something out of that. What's your experience with that? How do you handle that range of skill in a single class?
Okay, so your situation is very similar to the situation I was in when I was at the college full time, because we are in corn country, rural, about an hour west of Chicago, and believe it or not, it doesn't take that long out of Chicago before you're in corn country. So exactly as you were saying, I had students that grew up on the farm fixing their John Deeres and their combines and all that kind of stuff. But then I also had students that were like, maybe I'll work on a car, and they don't know we'll go extreme, don't know what a wrench is. They probably know what a wrench is, but they probably don't know righty tighty lefty loosey, that kind of thing. So and that is one of the challenges of being a college instructor with 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, right? Because some have already been swapping motors into their old Mustang or something like that with their dad in the garage, and other ones male, female, it doesn't matter, right? They have no clue. So that makes the college instructor's job very tough. So how do you deal with that? You have to, as an instructor, you almost have to spend a little extra time with the I'm trying to think of the most politically correct way to say this.
It's not as experienced.
The less experienced, okay. Spend a little extra time with them, but that means you're taken away from the more experienced ones. So you kind of need to give them something to do, right? So, all right, cool. Well, all right, plug in the scan tool and pull some trouble codes and tell me what's going on. And while they're doing that, then you worry about and again, it depends on the curriculum from the school and what class you're in, and are you in the shop or are you in the classroom? Because you're going to get people nodding off you know, oh yeah, I know what this is.
Hmm.
This is a waste of my time. But there's going to be the less educated, I guess.
Sure.
I'm trying to be correct, right?
Yeah.
They're going to suck that stuff up. But then the funny thing is, there's a little gray area in the middle because those students, and we're talking about, it happens in the industry as well, but we're going to talk about college at the moment. They think they know their crap, right?
Yeah.
And then they kind of, and I'm not going to do that homework. I'm not going to read that chapter of the book. I'm not going to do whatever. But when it comes down to test time and they challenge you or whatever, you go, oh, yeah, you didn't realize that a catalyst monitor was 2 trips minimum, right? And what enable criteria? What? Wait, what? What's enable criteria? You know, yeah, you should have paid attention in class because you were dozing off because you thought it wasn't important.
Hmm.
And again, I'm this
Well,
is a broad scope going on right here. I mean, being a college instructor is tough. It's very tough, right?
yeah, and well, I mean, it's not any secret that our industry is still male dominated, and I think that 19 to 22-year-old guy is very likely to have the attitude that you were describing, where
Right.
they've got a little bit of experience. Maybe they put a motor in, they did high school auto, and they're you know they always like to ask about the tuning, and I got this Mitsubishi and I do this and that, and so yeah, they don't want to go through the basics, right? So I already know all this stuff. I read all this stuff already. I've done this, I've done that, and that's just very, very common. So you have to find ways to keep them engaged, I guess, is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that range is tough. And I'll tell you something, I have by no means perfected this because sometimes it goes terribly wrong. But one thing I like to do is the students that are more advanced, once I kind of figure out my class, so we spend a lot of time together. Students that are more advanced, I like to pair them with the students that maybe are less advanced and
Agreed.
almost put them into a teaching role, right? Because
Completely agreed.
one of the best things you can do to learn yourself is to teach someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, maybe they are really good with this stuff. Well, have them explain it to somebody else. And all of a sudden, maybe they'll get to a point and they're like, I don't know. I understand this, but I don't know how to explain it. So they've got to think about it even more. And like I said, it doesn't always work. but I've been messing around with it and trying
I'll give you a perfect example of that. Okay. Let's say you got 12 students in a class and you're in the shop and you've got, I don't know, 4 cars to work on and you're playing with the picoscope, right? So you got a picoscope on each car and you've probably seen it. One student gloms onto the picoscope and does all the connections and does all the button pushing and the drop down menus and choose the amp probe and choose the scaling and change the time base and all the stuff that you have to do to get something as simple as, a fuel pump capture, right? And being an instructor standing back watching this group of 4 students mess with this car, that one of those students was doing it. Mm-hmm. Right. That was the student that was doing everything. Right. And they get it done before, let's say the class is 2 hours long. They're done 30 minutes in. Right. All right. Perfect. But they did it all. Yep. So then reset everything, shut the computer down, restart the computer and say, all right, cool. Now you guys do it again. But John, you don't touch this laptop. Right? You can give advice because you did it correctly and let someone else do it and force them to physically do it. Because I'm sure you've seen it where students just kind of ride the coattails.
Yep.
Right. And the students that do well are the students that like jump in and start pushing the buttons and do whatever. And now you're saying and I agree with you, you're like, all right, cool, you got it down for the most part. Right. Mm-hmm. Now your group, let's do it again. But you almost become the instructor role.
Yep.
Because you as an instructor have 4 cars with 4 different groups of 4 students, right? So you bounce back and forth. It's just like a hands-on class in the industry. I can't sit there with one group of 4 or 5 or 3, all day long. I got to bounce around, so give some direction. So if you had a student that was a rock star, pardon the expression, but was a rock star, cool, you did awesome. You give them a little pat on the back. Now let's do it again, but you don't do it, right? You would advise, and you still have to come back and check on them, but exactly. So then that's how you know which students are going the right direction. I don't care if it's scopes or brakes or whatever the case, right? But which students are the top of your class, no matter what grade they get, that kind of thing. You know who is passionate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's so interesting, and I'm sure it's not exclusive to this trade only, but you'll see, a student come through, and out in the shop, you can tell, like you said, they're going to be a rock star when they get into a shop. Like, they're going to make a ton of money. But sometimes that guy is not the best in class, the academic side of things.
Right.
And that's been a challenge for me too, is, how do you grade that individual, for the classic A to F scale or whatever? How do you grade that guy who you can just tell, man, he could walk into a shop right now and push 50, 60 hours of flat rate. And I guess whether that's a real measurement of a good tech, I don't know. Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but he's going to make some money, right? But he's just not there in the classroom, whether it's effort or, education or whatever he's missing there. That's always been an interesting aspect that I've seen in this trade. And I've run across a few of those students over the years.
I think if you, like we both have been in the industry a while and then moved into education, you kind of realize which direction they would do good at. Meaning, you might have a student that does not do good on tests. And I hate to say this, but they don't do good on tests, but they can pound out a ball joint, do an alignment, and do that kind of work. And there's always a place for that type of technician. If you want to rock out flat rate hours and you are good with busting your knuckles, doing a tie rod end or ball joint, whatever the case, right? There's a place for that technician. If you're comfortable there, that's fine, right? If you show some, almost said a word that would have been very offensive to to the ball joint guy. So I gotta be careful. Let's say you want to deal with some of the more advanced stuff, right?
Sure.
And even if it's just electrical, but ADAS, the stuff that's coming in the future, you're gonna have to be able to read. You're gonna have to, right? And I hope you don't argue with me on that, because you're gonna have to read service information. You're gonna have to be able to read wiring diagrams. And I'll be completely honest, the majority of my time, and probably yours, is spent looking at information more than it is actually on the car. And then you do a couple of tests, and hopefully they're accessible modules or whatever the case, right?
Yeah.
You do a couple of tests and it's good, but it's all in the knowledge, and it's in reading, and it's in comprehension. So if there's anyone listening to this that we'll use ASE as an example. I had a previous employer that told me they didn't care about ASE because if you pass an ASE test, it doesn't mean you can fix a car, which I would agree is true. Maybe you're a good test taker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said you could be great at fixing a car and fail an ASE test. because you're not a good test taker, but you could fix that ball joint or, whatever the case. Now more than ever, I think, the fact that you can pass an ASE test or any other test for that matter, or a college program or whatever the case, if you can't think logically, can't read, can't analyze a diagram, can't, those kind of things. Yeah. So if we'll go extreme, if my diagnostic technician, I own a shop and I have a diagnostic technician, if he can't pass an ASE test, then he's not my diagnostic technician anymore. You can't pass the test, right? Now, if I had a ball joint guy, I would really hope that he could pass the, steering and suspension, those kind of things. And you're not a good test taker. Well, guess what? It means you can't read freaking service information. I don't think it is what it was 20 years ago.
Okay. And that's perfect for a transition here. I want to read, I don't know if you know Hans Jorgensen. I think he's in Utah. Okay. But he sent me a question because he's working towards being an instructor as well. And he's a technician. He works on a lot of Volkswagens. And he was asking me, because he's been doing part-time and he's working towards being a full-time instructor. But his question was, real simply put, what does the average technician need to know to be successful in this trade, and meaning in today's automotive world, right? And we had a little bit of a discussion off of that. And his, I don't know if argument's the right word, but perspective on the current level of curriculum at the school that he's been substituting at is that it's way behind. It is 20, 30 years behind, focusing on, a lot of what the ASE or old NATEF accreditation stuff used to be, like engine rebuilding and trans rebuilding and diff rebuilding and that sort of stuff. Those are all the requirements that we actually still have to meet for our program too. But that the technician that's going in the field right now would be better served with knowing more stuff about electrical, about computers, about networks, about diagnostics, ADAS, possibly even EV stuff, depending on how far you want to go. But they're going to be better served because that's what the technician needs to know. So where I'm going with this is the technician that's getting into this, or the student that's going to be a tech, do you think that the level of knowledge they need now is more than it used to be? Or do you think maybe it's shifted from what it used to be? Meaning that, I don't know, I feel like it used to be more of a true craftsmanship to build an engine, to rebuild a transmission, where now I think a lot of what guys are doing is parts hanging, or it's the technical side of thing. Can you program a PCM? Can you read a diagram? Can you diagnose this electrical circuit or figure out this network? I think the required knowledge base is shifting more towards that. What are your feelings on that?
So there's a couple things we have to worry about that you mentioned. A college has to worry about ASE education. It used to be NATEF, correct?
Yep.
So you have to meet that task list. And the task list has changed over the years. Every couple of years it changes. And I'll use automatic transmission as an example. There used to be a whole bunch of tasks, and now it's been greatly reduced because I shouldn't say no one, that's the wrong word. People aren't rebuilding transmissions in the shops the way they used to, right? Or at least in the frequency that they used to. Same thing with, we've all seen it for many, many years. You don't rebuild alternators and put a new rectifier bridge and all that stuff. And you buy a reman one with a warranty and it's cheaper. And can you even get parts sometimes for alternators? So the industry has changed. So has the task list, right? So as a result, the curriculum has to change. So as the curriculum changes, it changes to what? Electricity. If you really think about it, and this is something I used to ask my students. I'm like, name a system in the car, in a modern car, that does not have electricity involved in it. Right? And people say cup holders. I'm like, yeah, cup holders. Right?
Well, they got heated and cooled cup holders now in some cars. So there you go.
Right. Exactly. And the only thing that I remember the student, he was kind of a smart ass. The only thing he came up with was carpet. And I'm like, okay, so there's no electricity in carpet. But I had to retort by saying, yeah, one of these days we might have heated carpet. Right? At the moment we don't. But anything else in the vehicle has electricity. So that, what does that mean? The curriculum has to shift towards electrical. And I don't care if it's steering, right? We got electric power steering, we got steering angle sensors, we got steering force sensors, and then in all the ADAS with radar, LiDAR, infrared, all that stuff. Analog brakes have been around forever. Airbags, every system on the car has to do with electricity. So where should the curriculum go? Electrical, right? Really, you still have to worry about, alignment angles. Oh, crap. Now what? How important are alignment angles nowadays, right? Before it was, oh, my alignment is, a couple of degrees off on whatever measurement you want. My tires wear kind of funny. But if they're off a couple degrees now, it's going to affect the semi-autonomous driving systems, right? Because the car isn't, the center line is not right. And, it is not your grandfather's gas station throwing on tires and brakes. It's not.
Right.
So it makes the education part of it a challenge. It does, because it's not what people think it is. And I'm not only saying that about the students that are coming in, the young kids. I'm thinking about the general consumer doesn't realize how advanced our industry has become, right? And the people that have to work on the car,
Yeah, going from a 2010 to a 2020, you look at them on the outside, and I mean, up here, one of them's maybe a little rusted, but they don't look that different. They both go down the road, but man, I don't know. The technology has really come a long way just in the last couple decades on what we have to know, and that is a challenge of an instructor. Is the car keeps getting bigger and bigger as far as technology and systems, and our time to teach has not changed at all. We have to try to fit everything in a small window, or take some part of the car away that we don't teach. But going back to what you said, where we can tie it, a lot of it together, is focusing on electrical skills, just those basics, because it applies to everything. That's why I've always liked electrical right from the start, because I'm like, it's the same on everything. It doesn't care if it's a Honda or BMW, it's going to do the same thing. So I can apply this constant to everything I work on. So I focus on let's learn these basics really well and apply them to all these areas. So we try to do the same thing with our students, is to, how can I inject that into everything that we talk about, right?
See, now I'm going to take this a little bit different angle. You have an advantage, much like I do, and some of my favorite instructors, some of my mentors, some of my college instructors, not all of them, but some of my college instructors, but in aftermarket or college, doesn't matter. They were working on cars every day, right? Just like you and I are, right? You're teaching at the college, but you're still doing mobile. You're still working on cars. That keeps you sharp and up to date, correct?
I think you have to. I'll let you continue, but I just, I don't see how I could do it if I wasn't working on cars right now, but I'll let you continue.
No, I would, that's exactly where I was going. Right. So the people I gain the most knowledge from are the people that are working in the industry and decide to train, right? Whether it's college level or aftermarket or whatever the case, right? So you get to see the newest stuff, the latest stuff, the greatest stuff. And I found that with not only college it really helps, but in the industry as well. Most of my classes are case study based. So I might cover a piece of theory, right? A friend and colleague of mine, Eric Ziegler, likes to call me Bill Nye the Science Guy. Okay, because I get the theory part of it,
Sure.
right? But so I'll interject that into a class. And then here's how this particular component works. Here's some theory behind it, but then I reinforce it with a case study, which might be a broken car I worked on, 2 weeks ago. The Nissan that you brought up before we started this call, that was one I worked on just a couple months ago, and that was an oddball one. But yeah, and I got all the data recorded, so you can talk about the theory. And you get the eye rolling or the college students like falling asleep. And then when you bring the real broken car in and start asking questions, well, what would you do next?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, well, guess what? That wouldn't resolve it. I'm going to do a compression test. Nope, it's all good. Right. What next? Oh, we're going to check ignition timing. How are you going to check ignition timing? There's no mark on the crank pulley and a timing light. And by the way, we're not doing distributors in class anymore, right? So, you plant those seeds and get them thinking, but the fact that you have a real broken car case study that you fixed I'm sorry to say it this way, screw with them, right? You make them think. And it's a little different looking at a broken car, even if it's on the screen, even if it's on your whiteboard or your projector screen or whatever the case, it's a little bit different than just say, read chapter 2.
Yeah. And it's right? So I always love case studies when I go to a class, and I never really thought about why I enjoy listening to someone else's case study that they go through. But there's something, and here's an area where I know nothing about is psychology, but there's something about it, a story of any kind, regardless of what you're trying to get across to someone, where they're going to remember it. And maybe it's pulling on emotions, or again, I'm way outside of my capacity here, but I do know a story is going to help stick information in somebody's head better than me just listing off facts about a car. That if I give it some personality, some human element to, here's where I screwed up, here's where I tested that thing and it wasn't right at all, and I went the totally wrong direction, but then we ended up finding it was this. I'll be out in the shop with the students and they'll be like, oh, this was like the one car you talked about that you did this on and you screwed up. I was like, yeah, exactly. And you're remembering this stuff. And so there's something to that helps. And I have the students present their own case studies after the shop period, and it can be something basic, but I want to hear them, explain their process in front of the class, which some enjoy more than others, but there is an element to that really, really makes a class, whether I'm going to one or I'm teaching one, better, I think.
Right. I was going to say something. Let me see if I can. I tell students the second best way to learn is from your mistakes. The best way to learn is from the mistakes of others.
Yeah, right? Definitely.
Right. So I always preempt, when I'm about to tell you a mistake I made in the past, like put an air hammer through my hand because I was an idiot or something like that, here's what happened. Here's why it happened. Here's why I diagnosed this car wrong, whatever the case, learning, right? Remember it. Yeah. And you know what? They're never going to remember it. they're going to make that mistake themselves. And then when they make that mistake, then they're going to look back and go, God damn it. Scott told me not to make that. But then they won't forget it, right?
Yep, that's right.
Really, it's true. There was something else I was going to say there too, and I forget what it is. But making students think, right? And that's really kind of what we were talking about. Realize what's going on, don't make the mistakes, learn from your mistakes, that kind of thing. One thing I've done in the past, and I haven't done it in a while, but you might be able to try this with your students, is you might have discussions where we're not the engineers that designed this car. We just need to figure out what they did and figure out and, diagnose it, right? I played a game in the past, and it usually works out pretty good. It takes a day, or not a day, but a whole class period. How long are your class periods? Like 2 hours?
We have them all day from 7:30 to 2.
Oh, then you got plenty of time.
Yeah.
Okay. What I used to do was, and this will be for the little bit more advanced students. I would say, all right, break up into groups, 3, 4, whatever the case. Here's 2 pieces of paper, draw a battery on the top of each page, right? And then on one side it's going to be inputs, one side is going to be outputs, and make me a car that runs. Here's the criteria. It's a V6. Don't get fancy. Don't do variable valve timing. Don't do, anything, variable valve lift, displacement on demand. Don't do anything like that. You got a 6-cylinder sequentially injected coil over plug vehicle, right? And draw me, make this car work. What do we need? Right? So they get to draw, okay, here's 6 ignition coils. Okay, they all have a power feed here to the battery. And I'm not even concerned about fuses or ignition switches or anything like that. Here's fuses to make that work. These ground wires have to go to triggers in the PCM. Cool. Draw those. There's our coils, right? We got injectors. We got, and then as an instructor, you walk around the room and go, this car ain't going to start. It's not going to start. You're missing something. Right? Because the same thing that they know. It needs spark. It needs fuel. It needs, okay. Why is this not going to start? Oh, because you forgot the frickin' fuel pump. Draw in a fuel pump. Okay. For the fuel pump, we better have a relay. And I'm talking old school. But the point is that they are not reverse engineering a car, they're engineering a car. And if they can draw out the basics of what it takes to make an engine run, electrically anyway, right? Then they can reverse engineer a wiring diagram when they need to. Because you and I both know they get way more complex than what any one of these students is going to draw. But right. It's still a fun exercise. And it's kind of funny because the times that I've done it, when I first explain what they should do, I get a lot of eye rolling and a lot of sighing and like, oh crap. But by the end of class, they're all in a great mood. They're like, wow, that was fun. That was pretty cool because it reinforces what they know.
Yeah.
Right? They go, all right, cool. You can't do it with the first year student. you got to do it with someone that's had some of the classes. But that's one of the things I've done in the past. And would I do that in the industry? No, I wouldn't do that to someone that's been in the industry 20 years and they're in my class and vision. Okay, draw me a no. No. They're you know what they're going to do? They're going to give me the middle finger and say, I'm out of here.
Well, that's a great idea. I'll have to give that a shot and
play with it.
Putting their knowledge down onto paper and exactly like you said, making them think. I think that's another good transition point here, though, is you mentioned that's not something you do in an industry-led class, and I don't have any experience doing that besides sitting in one. What are some of the big differences between a college level and an industry level class that you noticed doing both?
My biggest,
maybe what are some of the bigger things you got to consider when you're going into?
okay, that's a good way to say it. My biggest consideration is when I'm in a room with however many people, I really have no clue what level they're at.
Mhm.
Right? When you're at a college level, you have a kind of a window, right? Even if they were, turning wrenches on the John Deere with their dad, or throwing a motor in the Mustang, or whatever, they have. There's a small window, right? For the most part, okay. When you get out to teach at an industry event, you could have those individuals, but you could have someone that's been in the industry for 30 years. Right, and is already doing programming and owns 4 scopes, and so the level is ridiculous. Okay, and that was actually, that's one of the things that made me most nervous, and still makes me nervous the first couple of minutes of class. Is who's in this room, and what are they smarter than me? Because there's definitely people that are smarter than me, right? But the way I kind of approach that is, number one, if someone asks a question and I don't know the answer, I admit I don't know the answer. That we'll put that aside. But I try to build my classes working from basic to advanced, right? So hopefully, if someone comes to one of my industry classes, if they're advanced, they might be a little bit bored in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But I guarantee it's going to build. It's going to move further forward, because the people that are let's just use the term newer to the industry, right? They're going to get more in the beginning, and then they can hang as long as we build and build and build and build and build as we move through case studies, because I reinforce everything with case studies, right? We work our way up. So eventually, the later part of the class is going to be a little bit more advanced, and hopefully appease the more advanced guys or girls, right? The
Mm-hmm.
beginning would be, the more entry level. I don't want to say entry level, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And,
I have to consider that there might be some entry level people sitting in the classroom, I suppose.
right. And that's one of the things that I hate about the way classes are built. If it says basic in the title, you're going to go to a conference in Dallas, Texas. I don't know. Okay, I'm just making it up. But this class says basic and this class says advanced. Everyone's going to take the advanced class because they think they're advanced. They need the advanced stuff, right? So I hate that billing. There was a class recently, I got to be real careful how I say this, that had something to do with decoding controller area network.
Okay.
I think. Okay. And to me, that means, holy crap, we're doing serial decoding. We're gonna look at the CAN capture, and we're gonna figure out which module is talking, and that's insane stuff for your average technician. But I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Class was not that at all. It was a basic CAN class.
Okay.
And it was a good class. It was just billed wrong, right? So I would never say, hey, we're gonna do this advanced, this, and then go, oh yeah, we're gonna hook up a compression gauge, and here's what compression is.
Yeah.
No,
right.
it's not advanced. So that's one of the things I don't like when a venue says, when I'm pitching a class to teach, right?
Uh-huh.
Because as a trainer, you got to talk to a venue or an event and say, here's the classes I have to offer. What would you like? And then they ask me, is it basic, intermediate, or advanced? Like, all three, right?
Yeah, send everybody.
How do I classify it? You know what? If I want to sell the class, I'm just going to say advanced every freaking time. But then I'm going to piss off people that are attending, because it might not all be advanced.
Yeah.
Let's build. So in a way, my particular industry classes are kind of like your semester at the college, right? On one
Okay.
particular topic. Let's pretend you had a fuel class, right? And I don't know your curriculum, I don't know your class. Let's say you had a fuel injection class, right?
I do have a fuel class, so that's perfect.
Right, cool. So you start out with some basics like, what is fuel pressure? What is fuel volume? Let's do some electrical. How do we run a fuel pump relay to power this pump? Okay. And then we start talking about port fuel. And then maybe you get into, direct injection, high pressure pumps. Am I pretty close to your class?
Yeah, that's the scaling it goes. Exactly.
Right. So you build. Same thing.
Mhm.
So you're doing it over a semester, and I'm trying to do the same thing, unless it's a very specific topic. But I'm trying to do the same thing in a 3 to 4 hour time frame, right?
Yeah.
And how do you build that? So if you were to do your semester fuel class in 4 hours, would you say it's beginning, advanced, intermediate?
Yeah, it's all of the above. If I'm covering all that stuff, yeah.
Right, exactly. But you gotta cater to the that is I believe, if I'm not mistaken, your question was the difference between college level and the industry, and I think that is the biggest difference, because you have time, even if it's only a semester, but a semester is still a lot of time to stretch that information out. Whereas in the industry, you gotta, with online virtual stuff now, you're talking, 2 hours probably max. So what do you cover in 2 to 4 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's a little bit tough.
All right, let me ask you this, as far as putting on a class, because I know what it takes to prep for my classroom and what we do, and boy, it knocked me out of my socks when I first started. I had, when I went on my first day, I had what I thought. I was like, I got at least a day and a half, probably 2 days of material here prepped, ready to go. And I had never taught before. And I was through all of it by lunch. And I'm like, and I didn't have a clue the prep time to running a class. And if anybody listening has never taught, it's crazy the amount of time you spend beforehand to get ready for this short period of actual class. So anyways, back to my question, what's it take for a 3 or 4 hour class for, like, let's say vision or something similar to that, the preparation that goes
prep time
behind some,
a lifetime. well, think about it. You said vision, okay? So vision is like the. Would you agree, one of the, if not the premier event?
I would agree with that, definitely.
Okay, right.
Maybe that's a bad example, because I would be like,
no,
I'm never ready.
That's okay. But we'll go to the extreme. You know what? Whenever I teach at Vision too, it's like, hey, I get those jitters, right? But the point is that, if we're going to take it that far, what did it take to put together, let's say, a programming class? Okay, many years ago, I did a programming class. They're 8 hours long, and Eric Ziegler taught with me. So I
attended that class, actually.
Oh, you were there?
Yes. That was before I got into programming. So thank you.
Hey, no problem. Hopefully I helped you out some, right?
You did.
So did we actually have the live modules that time, or no? Mm-hmm. We did, when I programmed them on the screen?
Yep. It was 2017.
Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry. 18.
Yeah. So I even had the DRB3 with the camera on it, right at break time, and you could, okay, cool. So you were in that class. Perfect. But the prep time for that is, you think now that you've been programming, like, oh, hey, cool, no problem. But we had to save all the screens. We had to go through the learning of, hey, I'm fixing cars every day. I'm programming this, I'm programming that, I'm programming the next thing, and making your mistakes, and then putting it all together into class material. And if I'm not mistaken, that class started with Ford. No, it started with the basics which is probably battery chargers and equipment. And then it went into Ford, because Ford was at the time, and probably still is, one of the easier ones to do. So and more forgiving ones. So we did Ford, and then we did GM next, and went through the tooling and did the programming for GM, and then we did Chrysler, and then at the end of class we did a couple oddballs. I shouldn't say oddballs, but some Toyota, some Honda, some, whatever. With the cars, we don't program that often, right? So think about it. You being a mobile tech, how long would it take you to save all the screens to put together a Ford class, a GM class, a Chrysler class, a Toyota, a Honda, there might have been a Mitsubishi in there, right?
Yeah.
So when you say how much prep time, I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know how much time was, to be honest with you, I try to make little folders for every car I work on. Sometimes I don't. Depends on my day. Depends on, how quick I'm trying to get in and out. If it's a good car, I try and, make a folder. And then that folder ends up being on my desktop. My desktop is messy as hell. Right. But then when it comes time to write a class, like, oh, do I have enough cars to write a class on EVAP or PCV or,
Sure.
And I go, all right, here's one. That's how my network class happened. I saved so many freaking network problems, and I still to this day get network issues all the time. Right. So I save them and throw them in a folder. And I could probably write 2 or 3 network classes with all the broken cars network wise, and that's, so your question was how much prep time? I don't have a good answer. It's a lot more than people think.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than people think.
I think that's a great way to put it. Because like I said, it was a lot more than I thought just for a college class. The time in front of the class is just a fraction of what you put in behind the scenes to get ready. So yeah, for anybody that attends any class, just keep that in mind for your instructor, how much work they put into what they're presenting in front of you.
Yeah, but you know what? Your students are going to appreciate you because they know, they know that you're still out there working and you're bringing real life stuff back to class, and they know that. They know the difference between an instructor that is in the mix as opposed to the lab coat textbook instructor that is riding out his retirement.
Well, yeah, I had that instructor, various classes and stuff that hadn't touched a car in 20 years. And I'm sure they were very, very good at it when they did it. I have no doubt, but you can tell this is really old, outdated stuff that we're covering here. And yeah, you can sense that very quickly. And I set out to not be that way. Again, like I mentioned before, I feel like I have to be doing this because as soon as I stopped wrenching, actually, Scott, because I went from a full-time tech at Firestone, I got the job teaching, and very, very quickly, I'm like, boy, I just feel the rust setting in on my entire skill set because I'm not doing this every day. I'm just working Monday through Saturday, every day at Firestone, and a lot of it's, ball joints or whatever, but I'm in it every single day. And now I'm not, I have to do something. So that's when I expanded out to the mobile thing, but I don't feel like I can serve them if I'm not actually doing it. That's my opinion. Maybe people have different perspectives on teaching, but that's the only way I feel comfortable standing in front of them every day.
Okay, we can go back. I said it earlier, those who can't do teach, right?
Yeah.
But you're still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Same thing with me, right? I'm still doing it. And that's to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons I hemmed and hawed about taking my full-time position at the college 11 or 12 years ago, whatever it was, because I liked working on cars and I wanted to stay in the mix, and I didn't want to do the students an injustice of me being a full-time teacher and not touching cars anymore. But I worked it out so that, I could do a part-time consulting, pretty much mobile, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Consulting business, so I could still touch cars every day, even if it was only for an hour or two. I could still do some mobile work, so I was still on the cutting edge. I was still seeing right. So that's probably one of the main reasons I went to teaching full time instead of part time, and then eventually, and I still touched cars, but eventually I got tired of the politics of the school.
Yeah.
So that's and my mobile business was growing. So
sure.
So that's why I went that route. Well, some of the reasons why I went that route.
I can relate to both of those things.
Yeah,
we had a discussion not that long ago, so you know where my head's at.
Yeah,
there.
right. So after this, you got to go to a committee meeting.
Yeah. Oh man, that's the other behind the scenes things that students don't see is all the committee and advisory and. There's so much. My school email is ridiculous. The things that you get sent on a regular basis. And yeah, I don't know how far I want to get into it. I'll get in trouble.
We're going down a different road now.
Yes. I love where I work. It's a great place. I really do like where I work, but yeah.
Actually, I love the college that I worked at. I love the people that I work with. It was just my point was I want to teach these young kids how to diagnose and fix cars. That is what I really wanted to do. And the politics of the college and all the extra meetings and so forth that you're there, some of them are a total waste of time, right? Right. So
we're almost aliens as I'll say blue collar workers or tradesmen when we come into an academic setting. It is two completely different worlds, and I was shocked by it, honestly. The current term is woke, and I am as far from that as possible. And it was just very strange to be in that environment. And again, I like where I work. I really do. But boy, trades versus academics, just there's a big difference there. There's a big divide.
Yeah. Oh, we could do a whole episode venting about that, but we'll leave that for another day.
All right, that sounds good.
Anything else for me?
No, I think we covered it and then some. So awesome. This was fun. I feel like we were just BSing. So
yeah, we pretty much were, but
yeah, that's great.
We have so much in common from our history and the same path, and so it makes it easy just to sit and BS a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and offering all this knowledge for everybody. It's
cool. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I want to give Scott another big thank you for coming on and talking with me today. I really enjoyed that. I also want to thank everyone for listening. Hey, if you got any questions about the show or anything that we talk about, or maybe you have a suggestion for episode content, maybe a suggestion for a guest, or maybe you want to be on the show, feel free to reach out to me, and you can do so via the Facebook group, which I'll have a link to in the show notes. Check that out. Join the group. You got to answer 3 questions. It's not that tough, but you can reach out to me on Facebook as well if you have any suggestions. But other than that, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.